So a new episode of Dr. Stone has come out today, giving us more backstory to Senku, a new character introduced, and just all around an amazing episode. But before I get into the Senku stuff, which is honestly some of the most important parts about this episode, I want to talk about the new character, or new female character introduced, Kohaku, that was introduced at the end of the episode. So, Kohaku's overall design is very unique. And I think many are going to be talking about her design. I mean, with my little post I made on Twitter, I already saw many kind of talking about her as a character, saying that her face looks very weird, it's a very different design. And when you really look at it, it is different. It's a very distinct facial structure compared to pretty much any character you would see normally in an anime. Usually when you watch an anime typically have a stereotypical art style. You could usually see that most of the character designs are very similar in structure. But when you look at this female character, Kohaku, she has unique design. Like, her face is very different. Her eyes, the way her nose is positioned, her mouth, she just has this very different flair to her. But personally, I wasn't really as shocked about her design as probably many that were watching this episode for the first time. And the reason why, it's not because, let's say, I read the manga or anything, but it's because I am very acquainted with the artist of this series. The artist wrote Sunken Rock, and I reviewed that on the channel a long time ago. I've talked about it. It's a really good series, a really good manga. And Boichi, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, he has just a very different art style. And the art style he does to his female characters or facial structures of characters is very different from the normal manga slash anime. And so I wasn't really that shocked with this female character's design, because it's very similar to one of the main female characters of Sunken Rock. But yes, I can see why many would be a little bit like, whoa, her design just seems a little bit off, because it kind of reminds me of 90s, which someone did point out on social media to me. It does look a lot like a 90s character. Like, if you go back to, let's say, the early days of manga and anime, and you go back to, let's say, the 90s or early 2000s or whatever, you'll notice that her design looks very similar to it. Which isn't bad, it just, once again, because of how unique the art style is, it can be very unsettling for a lot of people, which I can see many not liking her as a character just because of how unique her design really is. Because I know many people typically like to, steer away from the things that are very different than they're used to. Like, let's look at Ping Pong the animation. Ping Pong the animation, when you first look at it, if you're just judging it by the surface, it looks really bad. But when you really look at the animation art, you realize just of a masterpiece Ping Pong the animation is. And that's kind of what I get here, is that just because it's different doesn't mean that it's bad, or we should just say, oh, it's horrible, we need to go back to the original design. That's not the case, which is kind of why I like, the artist so much of Sunken Rock, or the writer slash artist, and then the artist of Dr. Stone, is because of just how unique it is. But okay, anyways, getting into her character, Kohaku as a character in the story, obviously she's going to play a major role from going this point forward, because she had her name dropped, but also she's joining Senku's group, helping him out, and she also has a very different origin compared to Senku, Taiju, and, Yuzu. And the reason why is because she is someone that is a primitive. She isn't someone that was necessarily freed from the stone, which, let's get right into that. So, it's clarified very quickly. It doesn't have to even be directly told to us, but we can definitely see by the way she talks about Senku saying he's like a sorcerer, definitely means that she was someone that was born in this stone world. Or if she wasn't born in this stone world, at the very least she was someone that was a baby when she was petrified and then broke out of the stone at a very early age. That's the only thing that I could come to the conclusion to. That's the only thing, because you gotta think about this. Because of how all human life got petrified, turned to stone, most likely babies did as well, or they did, definitely they did, 100% they did. And so because of that, there is possibility that maybe, the parent and the child might have been unpetrified, but the kid was so young that they weren't really able to learn or adapt to the world, so they're primitive. But even then, if the parent was still around at the time, then you would think that the parent would have taught him things about the old world. So that kind of throws that out the window now the more I think about it. But it doesn't really make sense that the baby was the only thing to get unpetrified as well. I mean, I guess you could kind of go on a stretch and say maybe an animal raised the child. I mean, there is cases that animals kind of can do this. If you're, like, raised by, let's say, apes or something, it could happen, but it's very unlikely. Even if there has been apes introduced into this story and all that, I just truly doubt that that is the case with this female character. So my only thing I can really come to the conclusion to is that there was a section of humanity that survived the destruction of humanity itself, where, you know, everybody got turned to stone. But once again, the question comes down to is why is humans so primitive, or why is she so primitive? Because if some form of humans did survive the petrification process, and then eventually they got out of it, shouldn't they have been able to give the information up to their descendants? I mean, the descendants gave it down, but there is a likely possibility, because of just how time is in the first place, you know, information can be lost. Stories are messed up. Like, for instance, when you tell someone a simple story, like this girl picks apples and then she goes to her grandma's house to deliver them, you know, if the story is told, let's say, thousands of years ago, it might turn into a different type of story. There can be little things added on or replaced or completely removed that changes the overall message of a story. So it is likely, even if a certain select breed of humans did survive, there wasn't enough to where they can really form a community, build up civilization, and so because of how many descendants they've had, it might mean that they just lost that technology, didn't really know what to do, and they became kind of more primitive. Because we saw how Senku as an individual, how hard he was struggling by himself at the beginning of the episode. Like, he even talks about, with him knowing as much as he knows about science and all that, it was a struggle for him to go day by day being able to do anything. So when you think about it, even the most gifted in terms of the brain and for science and all of that will still struggle in a primitive world. They still have to do physical things that they're not normally used to. And so if you're someone on the end of a spectrum that doesn't have, let's say, like intelligence like Senku, then you're automatically doomed, because eventually, you know, your descendants are not going to really have much knowledge either about the old world. You're not going to really be able to explain to them properly, and so you're just going to create a primitive, you know, type of, you know, humans. So that's kind of what happened, I believe. That is likely. But even then, though, I do think her overall introduction is unique, because this does open the doorway up for other factions to still be around the world. So when you think about it, it just makes no sense for Senku, Taiju, Yuzu, and Tsukasa to be the only humans that is depetrified. It just doesn't make any sense, because with how 3,700 years passed, there is a possibility someone could have been around an area that either didn't get affected by the petrification, or they were close to an area that was able to get them out of petrification quicker. I mean, there's a lot of things to really add together. So, I mean, when you think about it, it just does not make sense for Senku's group to be the only ones that broke out of the stone. So with Kohaku's introduction, it kind of lets us know that there might be other civilizations out there, which opens the door up for, let's say, kingdoms to be built. Like, there's a likely possibility there might be actual civilizations out there that might be as advanced as humans once were, or let's just say primitive, like medieval humans that just have castles, forts, etc. So it's kind of cool when you think about it. There is a possibility that there is more out there than what we've seen already, which could lead into a lot of issues and make it to what goal Tsukasa wants is very unlikely. Because, see, if other people have already broken out way before they have, then that means that Tsukasa wanting to make a purified world isn't necessarily going to be easy at all, because he does have conflict he has to work through to be able to get that done. And if people have been around to form their own civilization for a very long time, then obviously he's not going to stand a chance. Even if he awakens, let's say, 5 to 4 people or whatever, it's not going to stand a chance if someone has an entire civilization already depetrified. You get where I'm going with. So, another thing, let's get into Senku. So, Senku, as a character, we could see that he is someone that we knew would not die. It was very obvious. Even before this episode happened, or the finale of the last episode happened, it was very apparent that Senku was not going to die. It did not make sense. It literally did not make sense to kill off a character that has given us so much for this story, but also someone that literally is just like the entire theme of the story. When you think about the story is about science, it's about proving that there really isn't anything really supernatural and everything can be proven with science. And that's kind of what Senku's entire character is about. And if we killed him off, then who would necessarily replace him? Definitely not Taiju. Taiju is a big oaf, which has been said many times. And Tsukasa may be intelligent, but obviously he's not the MC. He's the main antagonist. And when you look at Yuzu, yes, she's intelligent too, but I just doubt she would lead the charge. So it really just comes down to, like, who would replace him? The only thing that could happen if Senku is actually dead, if there is a time skip, and Yuzu and Taiju had a child, and that child was very much like Senku, wanted to know about science, etc. That's the only thing I could guess. So because of those little things, it just did not make sense for Senku as a character to be taken out. So it was obvious he was going to live. But the point here, though, is that we get a little bit more backstory to kind of how he came to the hypothesis on how he broke out in the first place. And there's different ways to break out than, let's just say, what, you know, the miracle water's for. Breaking people out with that certain miracle water that breaks the stone around you. He basically talks about how throughout 3,700 years, he was constantly thinking. He was doing math problems, etc., constantly counting the days and everything, which basically meant that he was utilizing his brain non-stop. And what he said is very true. Every single day, as us as a species, humans, we use a lot of energy. That's the reason why we have to eat so much, is because just to be able to think and use our organs, etc., takes energy. And obviously, we need to replenish that energy, or things will definitely go south very quickly. And so, with him constantly being able to think, it's not like all his body functions just stop. There has to be something that is supplying his brain energy. And so, because he was keeping his brain awake, he was slowly sucking away the energy source from the stone itself. And it revitalized his overall cells to where he could actually break out of the stone and be alive. So I do think that's really cool to really kind of give a little bit more of an example to how, once again, the whole law of, you know, matter can't just appear out of nowhere, or energy can't appear out of nowhere. You know, it's stuff that just, you know, it has to have an equivalent exchange. You have to be able to properly, like, have a balance between the two. And that's kind of what happened. The whole, you know, E equal MC square that you see from Einstein, that's always been on Senku's shirt, held to be a really important detail to what his breakthrough was to be able to break out of the stone in the first place. So there's just a lot of good things throughout this episode that's been building up for a long time. And it shows just the beauty of the writing when it comes to Dr. Stone, because a lot of the stuff that's kind of been shown to us for these past few episodes, the revelations and all that, was right in our face. It wasn't something that just necessarily came out of nowhere. It's been in our face. We knew kind of about this. It was very subtle, very well hidden. And until it was finally stated, that's when we realized, like, whoa, this has been in our face the entire time. With the whole, you know, E equal MC square on Senku's shirt, to just the whole thing with the stone on his neck and all that. There's a lot of things that's kind of been, you know, in our face. We just haven't really realized. So yeah, it's a good episode, and I think many can agree with me that, you know, Dr. Stone is just obviously getting started with its main story, because now with Kohaku joining the group, this means now that we have, you know, a split force. You have it to where Taiju and Yuzu can go infiltrate Tsukasa, get more information on him, while you have someone like Senku working with Kohaku, which is obviously very strong. There's no way she isn't to be able to even put up a fight like she did with someone like Tsukasa. So she would definitely be able to be the, you know, the muscle for him while he tries to do the science. So yeah, and on top of that, you could kind of assume maybe Kohaku is the love interest for Senku. It's very likely, because of her introduction and all that, and the way they kind of mesh together so well, they most likely are kind of like love interests with each other. I could see that. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.